This is Sunday afternoon in Thailand at 4 p.m., and this is the call for the UK Sangha for Sunday morning. And that I had a request from my friend Christina, but she's not on this call. But we did talk about it, and that is the three characteristics. Actually, in the Pali is Trilokana. Now, the three characteristics is not the main teaching of the Buddha. That the main teaching of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Noble Path, Anapanasati, and the Satipatthana. That's the main teaching of the Buddha. Starting off with the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where he actually introduces the Four Noble Truths with the concept of the middle path. Now, a lot of people have the idea that the middle path means that you've got to find the middle and stay there. And yet that's not exactly what it means. It actually has the quality of being able to find a happy place in the middle, and sometimes that happy place is one of the extremes or the other in the moment. And so it's kind of like a sliding scale. And the whole point is that we don't get stuck anywhere and call that stuck point the middle way or the middle path. An example would be that sometimes the Buddha, let's say in the Kasi Sutta, the horse trainer sutta, where he says sometimes he uses the soft, sometimes he uses the hard, sometimes he uses the soft and the hard in combination, and that when a student is unwilling to be trained with either the hard, the soft, or a combination, then he will kill them. Now, he's talking about it in a metaphorical term, more like ostracization. And so today, when we talk about the Trilokana, or the three characteristics, actually, the best place to find it is in the Dhammapada. Now, the Dhammapada is not the main teachings of the Buddha. Then, in fact, you could say that the Dhammapada was compiled and collected from a number of suttas over a long period of time, with some magical and made up stuff in there. And so the Trilokana, by the way, and we'll talk about this quite a length, is the favorite teaching of the Buddha that you will find in Vipassana meditation circles. And in fact, that's the reason why we're talking about it today, is to debunk much of the knowledge about it. So let's start off with talking about it in the sense of three things: anicca, dukkha, anatta. And those three things are used together. But you will find actually in the Dhammapada, starting at verse number 277, it states in the Pali, Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, and Sabbe Dhamma Anatta.
All conditioned things are impermanent.
Did you hear the word things? Ben, what is a thing?
Something and nothing.
Huh?
Something and nothing.
Well, actually, it's almost undefined, isn't it? We use it without even defining the word thing. All right, so continue on, Mike. I'm just making a point and we'll cover it later.
All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification. All conditioned things are unsatisfactory. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification. All things are not self. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification.
Now, notice that the word thing is used in all three cases, but there's a distinction that we'll start off with, and that is that sabbe sankhara anicca means that whether it's real or perceived, whether it's got an observer or not. Now, how many of you have heard the philosophers or the professors of philosophy talk about if a tree falls in the woods with nobody around, does it make a sound? You've heard that, Ben. Okay, so answer the question. If a tree falls in the woods with nobody around, does it make a sound?
I mean, sound would have to be perceived for it to be a sound.
Shouldn't we define what's a sound?
Sound waves and other waves, the worms, the bunny rabbits, everybody's going to hear that tree when it falls, especially the tree that it fell over on. So the word sound then has the quality of a reality as opposed to a perceived thing. So if you bring the observer in and the tree falls, it makes a sound because that sound can be heard. Is that correct, Ben? Are you here? I didn't hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So,
Yeah, vibrations meet the ear and the ear creates the
all right.
sound.
So the word sound then has two different qualities. One is that it depends upon the way that it's defined. Either it's a sound like vibrations, like the engineers would say, or it requires an observer. All right. So now we're talking about anicca vata sankhara, and anicca actually is a physical phenomenon, isn't it? In other words, things change. An example would be big clouds of dust in outer space because of gravity will collect together and form a star. And that didn't need an observer. The tree fell in the woods and made a sound, and that didn't require an observer. Now let's look at sabbe sankhara dukkha. Is dukkha an inherent quality of the universe? Does it exist outside of being perceived? Timo, what you think?
I'm not sure. I think of the famous simile with the two arrows or two darts.
Old age, sickness, and death is dukkha. Well, doesn't it require an observer to become old? Doesn't it require an observer to become sick? Doesn't it require an observer to become not an observer? So a lot of people, in fact, will wrongly define dukkha as like life itself is dukkha. But life itself is not dukkha. Dukkha is perceived. Now, this brings up the point that there are actually three mistakes that people make. One is that we mistake temporariness or flux or changing. People will perceive that as permanent. An example of that permanency is let's say the United States government. Don't we think of the U.S. government as permanent? And yet it's constantly changing. It's nothing like it was 10 years ago. And yet we see it as something that's just kind of permanent. We do that, by the way, with the self, too. That we begin to think that things are permanent. How about John just bought a new car? Is that car permanent? Just how many years is it going to last? And then it's going to fall apart. So the fact is that everything is temporary. Even water molecules are temporary. Everything is in flux. In fact, down at the very basic level of quarks and quantum physics, even the quarks pop in and out of existence. So everything, even down to the smallest detail or the smallest level that that can be observed and or mathematically understood, you still have anatta. It's real. It's everywhere. And yet dukkha is something that's perceived. So when people make the mistake, are things permanent or are they temporary? Wisdom through the Dhamma eye of the Buddha would say, no, there is nothing that is not temporary. Everything is temporary, whether it is compounded or not. That in fact, the only thing that could be not permanent would be something that's not, let us say, has no cause or it has no conditioning. Except what? And that is that maybe the conditioning starts up. And now it's been changed because before it didn't have any conditioning, and now it does have conditioning. And so everything is temporary. And that's one of the major mistakes that ordinary people make. The second mistake that ordinary people make is that they mistake dukkha for pleasure. An example of that is, oh, my family got bombed in Iran, and I should worry about them. I should take care of them in my mind. And in fact, he's feeling bad, he's worried, but he mistakes that for obligation and therefore mistakes that as pleasurable. Another one would be alcohol. People mistake dukkha for sukha. This is common. But upon investigation, we begin to see dukkha as it is. And so we can convert it from dukkha to sukha. Now, let's go to the third characteristic, and that is sabbe Dhamma anatta. Sabbe Dhamma anatta. Now, notice in the first two, it says sabbe sankhara, which meant anything that is compounded or anything that is subject to conditioning is temporary. Anything that is subject to change in condition, and a person feels that change in that condition, they don't like it, then that's dukkha. But sabbe Dhamma anatta means all things, both compounded, conditioned, and anything else. Now, one thing that we know of that we can talk about would be this wildly theoretical, conceptualized thing called nibbana. But if we look at it from an engineer's point of view, we can say then that actually the word in the Pali meant coolness or cold. That when things are in motion, there is, in fact, energy, there is heat. So The example that I would use for easy understanding is that you're out riding in your car, an ordinary ice, gas burning, it gets hot. It's got a radiator. The tires get hot. The brakes get hot. Oftentimes, especially in the United States, the drivers get hot. But when you bring the car home and turn the engine off, is it not still hot? But then, over time, because it's not being conditioned by the engine running, it's not being conditioned by movement, the car will cool off. And so when we say Sabbe Dhamma Anatta, that means that when we are not conditioning any reality with a perceived self, then things are naturally cool. So we can also go so far as to say that even though there is all Dhamma, which goes back to reality, going back to the tree falling in the forest, we can say that nothing, regardless of whether it's perceived or not, is no self. There is no self. There is no inherent quality of existence. There is no such thing as a car that has carness. The car, in fact, is a mental construction of the human being. Even dogs don't see a car as a car. In fact, dogs don't even see a human as human. That this is taken care of in Nagarjuna, who talked to Melinda and took a chariot apart and says, "Where's the chariot now that it's apart?" And that didn't we recognize, the chariot, or in our case, a car, doesn't really exist except in a concept. The rest of it is just a collection of parts. And some of the parts can be missing and we still think of it as a car. But somewhere along the line, you have to take the fenders off and the wheels off and the motor out. Where's the car? How about taking the seats out and the interior out, taking the steering wheel out? Is it still a car? When does a car become not a car? Has to do with your perception of the car. So, in reality, there is no inherent anything. And look how complicated all of this has gotten in the past few minutes, when in fact Mikey's translation just used the word thing. The three ignorances is that we perceive things as permanent when they're in fact temporary. In fact, things are changing so fast. Billions of things are changing at a billionth of a second. And so slow humans are likely to miss that and mistake that things are not changing when in fact they are. Dukkha is in fact often seen as either not dukkha, or it's seen as actually an obligation that when you're doing that obligation is actually pleasurable. But the big one is that we make the mistake of thinking that there is a self when in fact there is not one. Inherently, it's impossible for there to be a self. That what we are, in fact, is what we refer to as the aggregates. And the aggregates are, you've got a body, but there is no me in that body. It's just a body. At best, whatever me is there is a guest, not an owner. And yet we misunderstand that in fact, that's the primary reason why you have a makeup industry, a clothing, a fashion industry, mostly for hospitals, is because people mistake the body for me. And when the body feels bad, I feel bad. The same thing is true with our memories. The same thing is true with our ability to see things. We think that because I can see, there is a me there that can see. We also have it in perception because I can think, therefore I am. Descartes had that. He said, I think, therefore I am, and he was mistaken. It would have been better for him to say, I think, therefore I think I am. So the anatta is actually quite real, but we perceive it as being a self that's there. Now let's talk about self in a little bit of history. There are two words in Greek that we could look at. One is the word atom, atom. Now, atom actually in the Greek means you can't cut it. Atom, you can't make it, you can't cut it. This is why in early physics they came to the distinction between compounds and elements, and they call the element at its smallest form an atom. For instance, a hydrogen atom. Hydrogen is cuttable. The hydrogen atom is not atomic in the sense of that it's not cuttable. But that word is often used to describe no self, when in fact there's another word that we need to look at in the Greek. How many of you have heard the word atmosphere? Atmos. The word sphere, that's easy enough. That's just a round ball. But the atmosphere has the word atmos in it, and you can look at it in this sense that you have ATOM for atom versus ATMO for atmo. Now, the word atmo is the word in the language that we have from the Pali, the Indo-European language. It's the same word. So when you hear anatta, it's actually no atmos. Now, the point about the word atmosphere is that in early days, humans personified the atmosphere because it was in fact changing. Sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's dry. It has both weather and climate as a feature, and that the ancient Greeks and many others made it into a person or a personification. They made it animated because in fact it moved around. You could see the animation, and so they mistakenly thought that it was animated. This is where we get the idea that lightning bolts come from a sphere that is thrown by Zeus. And then the Christians, especially the Greek version of Christianity, picked up Zeus and used that as the word for God. Now, the teaching of the Buddha basically is saying there is no self in the atmos either. There's no self anywhere. There's no self in the atmosphere. There's no self anywhere. And yet, because ancient man mistakenly animated the air and all of the air around, including the clouds and the rain and the wind and all of that, was then personified into a deity. This is what then the Buddha has as the very first fetter. The first fetter is personality view. And most everyone has the personality view of me is me, in the sense of being kind of permanent. A leopard doesn't change his spots. Boys will be boys, etc., like that. But with the teaching of the Buddha, we begin to recognize that at best, you're a moving target. You're all over the place. You can define who you are today and then go and define who you are tomorrow, and it will change. Things don't stay the same. And yet we have this idea of a permanent me. You can remember things that happened when you were a child, but guess what? It's only a fascination that those things that you remember are not real now. They're not clear. You can't go back and verify what happened when you were 5 years old or 10 years old. Can't be done. You can either go and talk to people who were around then, they'll have a different view or a different version. Everybody has a memory system that is really not you. It's not reliable. So this whole idea then is that we make this primary mistake in three different ways: seeing things that are permanent when there are not, seeing things that are okay or all right when in fact there's dukkha there in your perception. You perceive the dukkha, then you perceive that that dukkha is not dukkha. It's kind of like a dual issue. And then the anatta is there, but we have the delusion that there is a self. Now, one of the ways of seeing this trilokana is imagining that there is a road, the anicca road. And as you're going down the anicca road, changing, you come to a fork in the road. In other words, something actually changes. If you attach to that in the sense of, I don't want it to change, I don't like to change, then it's the me is created, and therefore dukkha arises in the sense of dissatisfaction. However, if you're trotting down that road and something changes and it's not yours, it's not mine, it's not my business, then dukkha doesn't arise. So basically what we're actually looking at here is that dukkha is caused by the delusion of a being a self there that can in fact experience dissatisfaction. Interesting, that things just change all by themselves in the sense of reality, but that we only experience dukkha because we don't like the change in reality. Paul, do you have your hand up?
Yes. So can Sakaya Diti be understood as a subset of Anatta? Would that be a correct assessment?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Sakaya Diti, the first fetter, can it be understood as a subset of Anatta?
Mikey, can you help me out with what he said?
Sakaya Ditti, would that be considered a subset of anatta?
I don't know. Is that a Pali word? I don't know it.
Uh, the personality view, first fetter, would that be considered as a subset of Anatta?
Yes, the personality view is that there is a me there. That's what it means by a personality. The personality view is there is a personality. And that personality is then kind of fixed, kind of permanent.
So what will be the distinction between personality view and Anatta?
Well, if you have a view of there is a me, then that is the view of an atta. And if you are looking more clearly, more directly, you can see that there is no you that is long lasting, that any you, any person, any self that comes up, arises, and then passes away. And then we'll go for a distance, and then it arises again and passes away. But the delusion is that it was always there. This is what we actually mean by, in the more noble definition of rebirth, is that the soul keeps reappearing, or the self keeps reappearing. But much of the time, it's not there. Let us say that you're reading a book, and while you're reading the book, you're taking the data from the book in. And then you read something and you don't like it or you don't understand it, the me arises. I don't understand, or I don't like this. And then you can put the self down and continue to read. As long as you've got the self up, you can't read. So this whole idea of the self, this anatta, is very temporary. It arises, it passes away, it arises, it comes again. You could say, in fact, that it can arise as often as once every 3 or 4 seconds. And the more Dhamma practice you put in, then the less frequently it's going to arise. So, Mikey, can you now read that the rest of that 277?
Would you like the Pali?
Wait just a minute. Let's go ahead and do the English first.
Okay. All things are not self. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification.
All right. So that passage occurs 3 times. It appears with anicca, it appears with dukkha, and it appears with anatta. And it says when you discern this with wisdom, you can come out of it right then and there. Read it again for us so that we can get very clear about what this is, Mikey.
All things are not self. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification.
When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from it right then and there. When one sees it right then and there. Now, let's get back into what I mentioned very early about Vipassana. Vipassana loves this anicca, dukkha, anatta. They call it the Trilokana. And when they talk about it, they say, if you can see it with wisdom, then you can get rid of it. And when you can see all 3 of them very, very clearly, that's the end of suffering permanently. All right. So they're making the mistake then that if you can see anicca, if you can see dukkha, if you can see anatta, if you can see all 3 of them, then that's the end of suffering. And then their students get really, really confused because they think that, oh, well, I saw anicca, dukkha, anatta last year. Why am I still suffering? Why am I still suffering if I saw anicca, dukkha, anatta last year? You can see how confused they are because they're making that mistake of seeing that I saw it a year ago, therefore I saw it so big and so powerful and so strongly that it ought to have permanent residual reference. And yet it doesn't. You can see it really clearly a year ago, but that's not going to help you to see it clearly right now. So this is the main point of this talk is that anicca, dukkha, anatta, that part where you can see it with wisdom, means that you can see it with wisdom right now. That's going to be the end of suffering right now. But if next time, if a minute later, somebody steps on your toe and you don't see that as anicca, anatta, and dukkha, that means then that you're caught back in dukkha. Oh, my toe hurts and you stepped on me and I'm going to hurt you back. And yet, where is the anicca, dukkha, anatta with seeing it clearly with discernment? It leaves. It's temporary. Even the Triloka is temporary, folks. This is the whole point of it. You have to keep coming back and coming back and coming back over and over and over to it. That just because you see it one time, even if you see it in a great big way, it's really, really a big deal. It's very profound. But you got to do it the next moment, too. Otherwise, that self is going to be reborn into dukkha. So, Santiago, do you have anything to say about anicca, dukkha, anatta?
Yeah, this was a good talk. Usually you'll have thoughts come up or an image or something like that, and it'll pressure you to take it up and then to like have doubt. And then you'll follow that and be like in the past and the future, and then you'll birth yourself back into suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's always temporary. Even the wisdom that you can see with discernment is always temporary. This is why we want to develop sati. That in fact, in there, the word sati is in the Pali. In fact, the word is pasati. Do you see that in the Pali there, Mikey?
Yes, pasati. Yada panya pasati.
Yeah. Yada Panya Pasati. You have to remember to look at it. And yet the translation doesn't bring that out. It's right there in the Pali, and yet it's always missed. With wisdom, you have to remember to look, to see clearly. So, Timo, what do you have to say about this?
I'm wondering if there is a practical distinction whether one looks for the characteristics or one just plainly looks correctly and sees them. Like,
Well,
is there a point in looking for them specifically for correct practice, or is it just looking and seeing them
all
because
right.
it becomes
The
apparent?
way that the Buddha teaches is that the mind is slow, that it doesn't have the skill. And so the first thing that we look at is the mind already in dukkha. In other words, we say, oh, that's an unwholesome thought. Like we see people having unwholesome thoughts on Discord regularly. They have unwholesome thoughts and they don't even know it's an unwholesome thought. They think that, in fact, it is just divine thought. They don't see the dukkha. And so the first training is to be able to see the thought itself as inherently, not inherently, sorry, it's not inherently, but we make it up as we don't like it. And so we have unwholesome thoughts. So the first thing is that can we begin to see that we have an unwholesome thought? And then later we begin to see, oh, I had that thought because I made that stuff up. I created it. I did it. The I there is in present. And when we can recognize that, oh, there's really no I there. So, in fact, what you could say is that always an unwholesome thought is because we've made some change, some anicca, as my anicca, my business. Like, for instance, the bombs are falling. The guy in Iraq says the bombs are falling, and he's not even in Iran. He thinks the bombs are falling on him when in fact they're in the next country. And he then has the feeling, oh, I'm worried about family and friends in Iran, rather than recognizing that he made the bombs fall on him when in fact they were falling in the next country. They're not falling on you. And so that's the delusion that they're falling on me. That in fact, any falling of bombs that happened on in Iraq recently was that Iran tried to bomb the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. Very little, not a lot of bombs falling at all. And so the bombs were not falling in Iraq. The guy's living in Iraq, but he thinks the bombs are falling upon him because he's identified with family and friends that are in Iran. My family, my friends, my country is being bombed. Therefore, I am being bombed. Therefore, I am afraid. Isn't that interesting? In fact, Ivan, you can comment on that one because you watched it happen.
What about if, like, let's say, just using what you just said as an example, let's say I stay in Iran literally, and the bomb is happening like distance away. Like, wouldn't that fear on some level be understandable? I don't know. I just
No. What is understandable is, wow, it missed me. You can hear the
I,
bombs in the air, and the old bombs go. If you don't hear the crash, you're dead. If you hear the crash, it missed you. There's no
okay.
reason for fear at all. There's a good reason to take cover, but there's no reason after you've taken cover. And there's certainly no reason if you do take cover or that you didn't take cover to have any fear. There's no reason. The fear is irrational, and the fear is irrational because it's me that is afraid of the bomb. If there
What
is
about
no, go ahead.
what about if there's like an impending war happening? I mean, just borrowing the recent event. It's just, Israel is attacking Iran, and like it's almost like the civilians there have some. It's understandable they are worried, but I don't know.
We can see the danger. For instance, Israel bombed Tehran. If you think that the bombs are going to fall on you, what do? You leave Tehran. The next thing is that the Israeli only bombed nuclear sites. So if you're at a nuclear site, leave the nuclear site. The Buddha mentioned that too, in the sense that there are 4 kinds of places that the monks don't stay, and one of them is that there is a famine. Then the food is going to be scarce, and the monks are not going to get to eat because they only eat the leftovers, and in a famine, the leftovers are scarce. The same thing would be true if there is a flood or if there is pestilence or a disease. But the fourth one, the big one here that we're talking about, is that monks are warned not to visit or to stay in a war zone. If there is fighting around you, if the bombs are falling, take a hike. Don't stay there and be afraid. In other words, we put distance there, and that distance then would be is because I have moved away from those bombs. There is the bombs are not my business. Well, what if the bombs fall on my mother-in-law? Again, the bomb that fell on my mother-in-law and the mother-in-law are not my business. That not my business is an excellent way of saying not me, not mine. Nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. So here's the situation. We're living in Iraq. We hear all of these broadcasts. We know for sure that Iran is being bombed. She lives in Tehran. Oh, my mother-in-law, what happens to her? And I start to worry about her. Does your worry while you're in Iraq, is that worry going to prevent the bomb from falling on your grandmother? Isn't that kind of magical thinking?
Yeah.
So whether I worry or not, the bomb is going to do what the bomb is going to do, right? In fact, that bomb is so far away that it's not my business. Not mine. Okay, this is why Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about it in that phrase of nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. Nothing is worth loving as I, me, or mine. Because in this case, I'm using the word love as a method of clinging. I love my grandmother. I love my mother-in-law. Therefore, I'm worried because she might be in danger. Well, maybe the thing to do is to call her on the phone and say, get out of Tehran. And she happily saw, I left last week and I'm sitting out here in the middle of nowhere and there are no bombs around. But he doesn't call her to find out that she's safe. He wants to worry. Oh, poor me. my family is in danger. And so, as good practitioners, we're going to stop doing that, and we're going to recognize it's not my bomb, not mine, not my business. If you can see everything is not your business, you're going to wound up being happy all the time, because everything that happens, every anicca that rolls by is not mine. The only reason we have dukkha is because we saw it as mine. And the Buddha instructs very carefully that me's and mine's don't exist anywhere in nature. There is no you there. So why do we make it up? Well, we've been taught to make up a me. And so it's only in this moment that we can see for sure that this is not mine. In other words, you have to see that anatta right here, right now. And when you can see that there really is no me, it's not my business, then we can be free from dukkha right then and there in that moment. So let us then practice that over and over and over again. So with that sati will be there for us. We will remember. And so we hear that bomb going, and then boom, oh, well, I'm safe now. It didn't get me. The dukkha is the fear of something might happen. If somebody holds a gun to your head and is really angry at you, guess what? You're still alive. There's nothing to worry about. If he really wanted to kill you, he'd already shot you. You'd be dead already. But if you get afraid enough, you can talk him into shooting you.
Dhammarato, can I say something?
Yes, go ahead, Karwan. This is a good time to talk. Go right ahead.
Dhammarato, in a way, I understand very well what you just say. You know, things are not mine and it is not my business. But if I really live like that, it feels so egocentric. It feels so like, okay, you know, I can right now just say nothing is my business, and I don't know. It feels so so loveless, without
You
love,
feel
or
what?
with no love.
Right. Isn't it marvelous that we don't have to love anything? That we
I
can
don't know.
treat other people well. We can have good friends, but if I start to love them, that means I'm going to start worrying about them because I'm attached to them. But if I have good friends and they're okay and I don't have any business with them. So in fact, an example would be you can, in fact, go to the grocery store and buy groceries and be happy when you get in the car, happy while driving, happy while going shopping, happy even when you read the prices, and then happily check out because there was no me there. But if I bring a me with me, then I'm afraid in the traffic because I'm worried about the prices when I get to the grocery store. Then I get to the grocery store and now I'm worried. And then I see the prices and now I'm really worried. I, me, mine. But you could go and do the Dhamma, do your business with the Dhamma with no attachment to it. That takes skill. That takes training. We first start training in seclusion, and then when we get I, me, my is not there, now we can go shopping, but all the while getting into the car, doing the driving, going into the store, and all of that time, you have to remember in that moment that this is just a duty. This is not me. This is not mine. Now, the best part about that is that the me's and the mines don't like it, but they can't do anything about it. You can't talk to the grocery store manager and get him to reduce the prices just for you. That at best you can feel bad, make a scene, and get arrested in the grocery store because you're so attached to I, me, and mine and you don't like the prices. So you have to remember over and over and over again, moment by moment, this is not me, this is not mine, this is not worth attaching to, this is not my business. I can go shopping and buy what needs to be bought without any bad feelings at all.
There's a difference between making an action, doing an action out of wisdom, and doing an action because of attachment. Like if your
Out of
grandma's
ignorance.
yeah, if your grandma's sick and the doctor's prescribed a medicine, you can go and get pills for her. You can help her with whatever she needs to be comfortable and to recover. But
Mhm.
you're not in
And you can
control of
tease her
what.
before you can tease her and make her happy before you go to the store. Then you can go and buy the medicines, and while you're there, you can call her again and say, "Hey, Granny, I've got just the right pills for you now." And then you can bring them back, and you can hand the bottle of pills to her happily. And she can be happy even when she's sick. That old age, sickness, and death is not a guarantee of dukkha. It's just the primary cause of dukkha. Why? Because people are attached to me. My body is sick. I'm sick. Rather than, oh, this body is sick, but it's not my business. I can take care of it, handily. And in fact, this brings in the whole point about psychosomatic illnesses, that most people make themselves sick because they attach to it, oh, poor me. And so when you stop attaching to the body, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, there's a distinction, isn't there, between caring for somebody, giving them the care that they need, and caring about the outcome. Like you can't affect the outcome. The pills might fix Granny, or she might die. Like that's beyond your control.
But you can be very happy while you watch her die. That if in fact you're skilled, you can watch her be happy while she dies. Your choice, but you have to be not attached to that. And how do we do that? We practice it over and over and over again when we're in seclusion, and then we start practicing it over and over again while we go shopping or while we're on Discord. This is why we want to have our Discord group to where people do not come on and have a pity party. They don't come on and vent. They come on and say, "Hey, yesterday I felt bad, but I feel great right now." That's good to be congratulated. If they come on and say, "Wow, I feel so bad right now," we can say, "It's not you that feels bad. So why do you create a you to feel bad when in fact you don't have to have a you that feels bad? You can have no you at all. Therefore, there's no bad feelings at all. The self is the dukkha. This is very clearly pointed out in the Paticca Samuppada, that you cannot have dukkha until there is a self that has arisen ignorantly. And when there's no you, there's no dukkha. But that's only
How
in
do
this moment. Go ahead, Carwan.
I found it hard to do it. I can see that all my problems are my problems. You know, there is me in every problem or everything that I have. I can see that. But how do I, let's say, free myself from me then?
Aha, I see you. And never mind, start again. Remember to look to see that, oh, there's a me there now. On Discord, for instance, when somebody insults you, there's always a me there that gets insulted. If there's no me there, then there is no insulting. No matter what the me in his mind was, if there's no me in your mind, then you didn't get hit with the insult. You're not insulted because there's no you to get insulted. There's no you to experience the sadness or the anger or the frustration of the dukkha, because you don't become dissatisfied because somebody made a remark. So that's a really excellent time to practice. is when people say something on Discord that you don't like. I see that. I see that I didn't like that, and it was a me that didn't like it. And so become on guard for that self that comes up.
I
You
think it's
created
easier
the
to
me.
catch it early, right? Like if you wait a few seconds, it becomes harder because the things kind of mix together. But if it's like right at the beginning, I've noticed that in myself.
Yes, exactly. The more often you repeat that I, me, my, it becomes a little habit right then and there. And it's harder to come out of because you've just ground it in. This is why we want to practice being quick. Catch it early so that you can change it easy. The harder something is ground in, the more difficult it is to get out of it. It's just like a car stuck in the mud. Don't get stuck in the mud. If you do get stuck in the mud, don't ground your wheels over and over again trying to get out, because you're just going to get stuck deeper and deeper. So you're absolutely right, Dominic. That's exactly right. We got to catch it early.
Dhammarato, just a quick question about the Dhammapada verse. Why is it Sabe Dhamma Anatta, not Sabe Sankara Anatta? Why is it?
Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. You see, the Sankaras are compounded, put together, a pile of junk. Well, suppose everything is completely organized. There's still no self there. So if you've got a library, let's say the city library and maybe the school library, and all the books are piled on the floor in one great big heap, as opposed to all the books are on the shelves in their proper place. In both cases, there is no inherent self to that library. That you can stomp the floor and the library doesn't say ouch, because there's no self in that library, whether things are organized or not. So if you can see whether they're organized or not, then you can see that it doesn't matter whether it is inherently a big pile or whether it's inherently a well organized. So now we're saying that Sankara then is the pile. Things are stuck together. They're disorganized. As opposed to the Dhamma, it's just the way that it is. It's completely organized. The reality is just reality. It's complete and whole just right now. And yet, in all of reality, there is no self anywhere, especially not a self of reality. Reality has no self, just like the atmos that we were talking about, the atmosphere. There's no self there.
I think I'm still a bit confused, because like why don't it just say all conditions are not self? Why the emphasis of all things are not? I guess I'm still kind of confused. I don't
Okay, well,
really get.
that's the whole point is that the word thing is now two different kinds of things. Okay? The thing is the junk, is the Sankara, versus the Dhamma is just reality as it is.
Mm. Oh,
And
okay,
there's
okay.
no self anywhere. Okay? So what you could say is that yes, someplace, somewhere, sometime, there is no anicca. Some things are permanent. And what we mean by that is that we're not able to perceive them as not permanent. So we think that they're permanent. And then they change, and guess what? The self doesn't like it. And so you could say that it's more correct to say Sabe Dhamma Anicca, because that would be actually correct. But we say Sabe Sankara Anicca because we're saying now that we're looking at it in the sense of perception, that you perceive that things change. You perceive a self that doesn't like it, and you perceive then the dukkha of the dissatisfaction.
The people who claim that they like kind of came out of this in like a singular kind of experience, you think they're just like lying, or like, are they just trying to say that they had an insight during their experience and then they learned to practice it, or like suddenly it became like sort of like unconscious confidence, or do you think it's just mythology? Because I mean, like people that we're all aware of claim that they have these like singular experiences where they're never the same
It is
thing
both.
come out of personality view.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said everything I wanted to say.
All
Or
right.
ask.
So whether it's mythology is because, yes, it is mythology, but it's also stuff that we made up. And the making up is that once I see with clear wisdom, once I see it clearly, I'll see it clearly forever. Nope, that's not true. That's like saying once it rains, it's going to rain forever. Nope, it stops raining. So we have to practice it over and over again, no matter how big the insight. Now, let me bring this point up, and that is that because human beings are instinctual animals, things that go against our instincts, like when you were 15, you got beat up by the bullies. Okay, that causes of what they call a post-traumatic stress disorder. Another example would be the guy goes to Afghanistan and watches his whole squad get killed right in front of him because of a sneak attack. And so he goes home after he's finished his tour of duty. All his family and friends are greeting him, and he's really glad to be home, and everything is great. And then he goes to sleep, and let us say about a week goes by, and then his young son, 5 or 6-year-old, jumps on him while he's asleep, and mom rushes to the bedroom to see what all the commotion is about, to find out that her husband is newly arrived from Afghanistan, is now choking his son, and he is completely back in Afghanistan because of that post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so things can be so bad, they can happen to you so bad that you remember them very easily. Good things don't happen like that. So people can have an insight into anicca dukkha anatta while they're in a retreat and think that, oh, I've got it now, and then they forget later because it wasn't drilled in that deep. So what we have to do is to keep drilling and keep drilling and keep putting it in and keep remembering, so as to change our habit, so that we automatically do not buy into it. We do not automatically make it my business. That we begin to have the wisdom so that when something happens, we say, wait a minute, that's not mine. And it's the wait a minute that is the new insight, the new wisdom to look again and to look again and to look again. This is why Vipassana meditation, who holds that really big insight as a major deal, everybody who has one comes out of it a year later or so confused. I thought I had it, and then I don't. I thought I was enlightened, and now I see I'm not. How many people do you know of like that, who write in a book in the 1990s, I'm an arahant, and now he's got to wiggle out of that because he can see, in fact, that he isn't. That things don't stick. Everything is temporary. That, in fact, going back to that point about the dad choking his son, even that post-traumatic stress disorder that we're talking about can be cured. He could begin to remember that don't strangle somebody who wakes you up in the night. He has to remember, he has to practice. Don't strangle your son because he jumps on you in the night. And you can train yourself out of that. So that great big training of, oh, I saw anicca dukkha anatta, therefore I've got no more worries for the rest of my days, is not true. You have to keep practicing. And in fact, that's part of the song, Ahuna Matata. You have to keep singing the song. You have to keep saying over and over again, no worries for the rest of my days. You can't just expect that to be the case. So, let's see. Mr. Bean, haven't heard from you in a bit. What do you think?
Good talk, thank you, Dhammarato. Yeah, covered a lot of interesting points.
All right.
No
How about
questions.
you, Michael Swift? Do you have anything to say?
It was a very good talk. I think remembering that there is no self here, there's nothing here. It's a good thing to remember. Keep practicing. So thank you.
Paul or Anmal, what do you think?
All good, Dhammarato. Thank you.
All right. Hello, Carl. Do you have something to say?
Nothing to say. Hello.
Hello. Okay, Ivan, did you get your answers?
Yeah, I did. And just a quick question. An Arahant is one that has seized this permanently, right? Like they had fully like see this, not just like, I mean, they're always remembering. I guess that's what I'm trying to ask.
Yes, pasasati. You have to keep remembering. You have to keep looking. Wisdom is only because you can see. Don't expect that you saw and had wisdom last year and it's going to residually take care of you now. So, does anybody else have anything? So, Mikey, why don't you take this thing home?
Yeah, thank you, friends, for being here today. We've been having people do one-on-one calls, and that's been great to see. Have a little goal for you guys this week. Reach out to someone new that you haven't had a call with before. A seasoned practitioner or someone that looks worthwhile to make friends with. And let's keep making friends here. Been having calls with some of you, and it's been really enjoyable. And it's also been really nice to see we've got people like Anna Sis and Eddie who will just join this Hangout channel on Discord, and people will join in too. So if you ever just want to join and hang out with people, come on and stop by. So yeah, thank you.
All right. So, thank you for coming, everybody. Good to see you all.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dhammarato.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dhammarato.
Bye bye.
Good to see everybody. Thank you. Bye bye.